Can you hear me? Councillor Randall. Calling Councillor Randall. Flight 216 Mumbai leaving. Look, can we just get him on the phone? No?
It's not appropriate for councillors to call this meeting. We have to be good sources.
I mean, he might be calling a parrot.
Well trained one.
If the councillor does recognise the number, they have someone who knows the text and say, should pick up. That's a suggestion.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Bernie, can you please put your Zoom on?
Sorry, we're trying to get the technology working first. Can we just please have another couple of minutes to try and resolve this?
Councillor Randall, can you hear me?
I can hear. Yes, I can hear.
Can you just settle down, please?
I'm fine.
No, you're not. Councillor Randall, can you hear me?
That's through her.
Sorry, could we? That's
Okay, so I'll just hang up.
Councillor Randall, can you hear me?
Try the next person.
okay.
Holly Evans, can you hear me? Mr. Jackson, can you hear me? Mr. Simpson, can you hear me? Is there anybody out there? Ground control to ground control. Right. Just in case you can hear me, we can't hear any of y'all. So technical glitch.
Let's do a test and see.
Councillor Randall, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pravanov, have put in a new motion, substantially different from the one that four of you all had signed to and alerted the Chief Executive and the rest of the councillors. Have you read the new motion?
I heard what Councillor Elliott read out, but I haven't.
You can't see it on the screen?
Oh, I can't see it on the screen.
Just hold on, I'll get Grayson to put it on the screen. Just hang on a moment.
Mr. Mayor, can I say something?
No, just hold on. I just want to get confirmation that you've actually seen it.
It's the same thing. It's not helpful for Councillor Heffer to have said, I've emailed him. It has to go through the council. I would rather that if he does read something electronic, it's something that we've sent, but it's even better that it's on the screen for everyone to see the same thing at the same time from the same source.
Right, it's on the screen now. Randall, can you see it?
I can only see you, Mr. Mayor.
Have you seen the amended?
No, I can only see you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, that's because it's dark. Can you see the motion now?
Yeah, yes, I can.
Okay, can you be, I'll give you a minute for you to read that.
It doesn't require a couple of minutes. I've read it.
Oh, you've read it now. Are you happy with that?
Well,
No, just say that you read it and you're happy to
okay, yes.
support.
Yes.
Right, that's all I need to know at the moment. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Wait. Because, yeah, Councillor Randall, can you hear me?
Yes?
I think we'll use the phone as the means of communicating with you until we sort the technical side on problems that we're having. So can you turn off the computer system? Or mute it because the sound is, we're getting feedback.
Yep, okay.
Cool. Right, so that's the motion now stands. It has been moved and seconded, and I understand the three councillors plus Councillor Randall have supported it. I go back to Councillor Coates for your next question.
I have 5 actually, so if you just allow me to go through them. I understand from the previous correspondence from Mr. Mellon that there's a lease agreement put in place with Composting New Zealand. I'm not too sure of the details of that, and I just wondered whether this, I can't remember the specific wording, from what I recall, I think it referred to the site, and this potentially from a legal aspect could have an implication on them if they're understanding that they're leasing the site, and now we're making a decision outside of that impacts on their potential lease. And then I've got 4 other questions.
Sean.
Do you need me to mute? Off.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so yes, we are currently negotiating the terms of the lease, and site coverage and area on that site would be part of that. So this could potentially have an impact on that, but it's very hard to quantify that without understanding. You know, as I think the Chief Executive mentioned, we don't own all of that infrastructure. So all I would say that it potentially complicates that process further and may limit the activities on that site potentially that we're looking at negotiating with at the moment.
So the second follow-up question is based on both the Chief Executive and Mr. Mellon's comments that we don't own all that infrastructure. Can we therefore have a recommendation about retaining infrastructure that we don't currently own?
Obviously not. I can only assume that the motion will refer to anything we have on the site at currently, and I don't know what that might be.
Yeah. So the next question is in regards to the request around the surveying. There's, from my perspective, there's not a good understanding in terms of what that involves. So I know through the resident satisfaction surveys they can cost $30,000 or $40,000. Is it a phone survey? Is it how would you fund that? And yeah, I guess the size and scope of that survey to be able to do it in a way that has, you know, meaningful data coming back, acknowledging though that it was a survey done previously of the users. So I'm just wondering the view on that in terms of the survey cost implications and methodology and so forth.
Thank you, Councillor. And obviously I don't know how we would propose to do it. We would have to take it away and think about it. Our options would include, so a targeted rate would have to be on an, we can't actually introduce a new rate, by the way, without an amended LTP.
That's my next question.
A targeted rate would...
Can you say that again?
We can't introduce a new rate without doing an amendment to the LTP, is my understanding, and auditors are happy to speak to that as well later. Were we to be simply considering a survey about that, and I don't know, trying to be helpful, if councillors thought they would do that in the next annual plan, survey options, because it would have to be applicable to the entire Waikanae ward. Options might include a mail drop to every household, might include a properly randomised formal survey of a sufficient number of residents in there. So we wouldn't do anything like that for less than $25,000, and obviously that's not in our budget, but that's a separate matter should it go forward.
Okay. So it does partly come to my next question, which is around the targeted rate. My understanding, there's been comment that it would be a targeted rate of $17. My understanding from the staff when they mentioned it in the workshop was that that was around an average. So like with our rates, some could pay less and some could pay more than that. Also noting that that would only be in year one. So if we look at the financials for that site, that would potentially, based on historic information, be more in year 2, year 3 and so forth. So would that form part of that consult? Because you're essentially making someone to make a decision on, you'd need to have enough information that they would understand this isn't just $17 per household for perpetuity. It would be potentially increasing. Just adding on to that though, that the targeted rate would be for all Waikanae residents, not just the users of the facility.
Currently, that would be the only mechanism I think we could use. Mark might want to speak further. If we were to define it at a lower level, a smaller group, then that would be a whole lot more complicated because we'd have to create a special group for targeting a rate to. So it's not that it's impossible, it's just a lot of work and complicated to do. Did you want to add anything?
Through you, Mr Mayor, and just to confirm, that $17 was the average. So it was $123,000 would be split across the Waikanae ward. The average increase for a Waikanae resident is $17. Some will be above that and some will be below.
Okay. And the last two questions, I'll just wrap into one, was certainly from my perspective, I'm not sure about other elected members, it would be helpful to have an opinion from the auditors, Ernst & Young, whether this proposes a change to the LTP, their opinion on the impact of that. And also from Audit and Risk as well, from Brian and from Gary. And that's all from me.
Mark, I understand that they are online, they're listening?
Yes.
They are listening?
They are listening, they are on Zoom, yes.
Okay.
So we are not going to be able to hear anybody on Zoom.
Thank you very much. Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd also like an answer to those last two questions. I was going to ask the same thing, that the auditors provide us with information. But in the meantime, maybe the Chief Executive could provide some guidance. So what are the implications to us passing the long-term plan today? I mean, that's what we're interested in doing today, if we can, so that we meet our statutory obligations. If this were to succeed, what are our abilities to pass the long-term plan today? Do we know?
Thank you, Councillor. If we have to make any amendments to the LTP as a result of this motion, and I'm uncertain about that at this stage. If we have to make any changes, then we are back to square one. So if this motion gets passed and we conclude that we have to change the LTP, effectively that's the end of the meeting today. Everyone can go home. We will then advise you as to how long it will take us to redo the financials in particular and the annual plan and the LTP, and when we can get those remodelled, when we can get them past the auditors and the OAG, and when we can bring a paper back with the statutory timeframes with the changes in front of you. So short of people working 24 hours a day, I don't see that can be done by the 30th of June. And that would depend anyway on our auditors and the OAG being willing to do their bit. So at this stage, if there is a change, and I'm not saying that there is, if there is a change, I would be expecting that we'll bring something back to you at around about the end of July. That means we have to strike our rates based on the current year's rates. That means that the 3/4 of rates that follow will be significantly higher to catch up the difference. That means that we will be in Parliament, highlighted as one of the councils that couldn't fulfil its statutory obligations. That, I think, will play out quite badly for elected members next election, if you want my honest opinion.
So which part of this motion, in terms of the activities that we have to undertake, provides a risk in that area? And we can refer this to the other parties that James mentioned if we need to. But so to me, there's kind of three parts to it. I mean, I've only seen it now for three quarters of an hour, so it's really hard to debate this at the last minute, which is why we have notices of motion. But notwithstanding that, there's the survey that has to be carried out and the cost of that. Then there's the implication to fees and charges if it's a user pays thing. I'm not sure whether it's being suggested that it's a user pays on a per user basis, which I presume would be prohibitively expensive to cover the $123,000 cost, which was my next question. And then there's the implications by carrying out a survey. Are we creating the expectation that we have the facilities and ability and funding to retain the operations? And what's the implication at that point? And do we need to worry about that point now, or do we only need to worry about the survey now? I'm just unsure what we're deciding right now in terms of a forward work program. I don't know if I've made that clear.
Look, I think you've asked a set of questions. The Chief Executive needs to answer that, and then I want to open up and see any other questions, then I need to get the business going.
I'm in the same position as you, Councillor, obviously, and possibly in debate. The elected members who are proposing this might explain a bit further about what they're thinking, but staff would have to come back and say what it means. One way I read this is that we will proceed with closure of the operation as we have agreed and has been put in the LTP for adoption, but that we would then go and do a survey of Waikanae residents to ask them how they feel about paying something. Depending on the results of that survey, sometime in the next 12 months, this council will then make a call on the results of that survey and whether it wants to do anything as a result. That's one way I could read this, because it appears that it's not trying to directly rebut what is in the LTP. It is now asking that we ask the community for their thoughts on that, even as we have done it. I think that the problem with that is you're setting the community up with some strange expectations. We've closed it temporarily. We're asking you if you want us to reopen it or refund it ourselves, rather than the approach that has been negotiated through Mr. Mallon and the current operator.
Councillor McCann.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is it appropriate to ask the people who put the motion forward for an explanation around what they mean by the user pays part of it? Because
I think that should come at the point of intro response.
Thank you.
Okay, look, question time over the issue, motions over.
We're not getting our comment on the auditors. Given our technology problem, I think that's difficult.
Sean.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to add to the Chief Executive's comments. And Councillor Coots raised that question previously about the lease negotiation for the Greenway. So that has always been on the premise that the site would close to recycling. So I can't commit that that would continue in terms of the current discussion without having the ability to actually talk through what's proposed there in terms of a changed motion. That was.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, your right of intro to the motion that you put up.
Thank you very much. Look, first of all, I'd like to make it perfectly clear that this is not a notice of motion that I have put up personally in any way. This is a collaborative effort from 4 co-signees of this notice of motion. We followed process that is available to us through our standing orders correctly to put this notice of motion forward. It was accepted by the CE. The only thing that had to happen at that point was that that notice of motion be included in the agenda. There was ample time to do that. We didn't give 5 days or 7 days notice to the CE with this notice of motion. We gave 10 days. Any delays, any lack of information to you on the original notice of motion, I can only apologise for, but frankly it should have been available to you and the public at the beginning of this week at the latest. So going on to our amendment, it was also always our intention to follow the processes available to us and to propose, discuss with you, debate with you all, decision makers, and propose any new resolutions or amendments to the resolutions as we normally do, as is normal practice. The fact that our original notice of recommendation has been soundly criticised both in the public and the media as well as in this room, and that we have taken the time this morning to sit down early with our lawyer and try and propose an amendment that is suitable, and that effort has now, which we were asked to put to the table first, has been thrown back in our faces, is something that I am not really appreciating at this time. But there are a number of reasons for this notice of motion and for our request that the Waikanae residents be consulted. This is a reduction in service, and according to Section 82 of the Local Government Act, any reduction in service requires a special consultative process. I can give the example of the 2017-18 annual plan, where a reduction in service of curbside sweeping 4 times a year across 500 kilometres of streets was a key question in that annual plan. Incidentally, the operating savings was 62k, but there was a legislative requirement for a proper consultative process on that reduction of service. Not a quick mention in the consultation document. Secondly, we made our decisions and workshops based on the information on the premise that New Zealand Composting were moving off the site completely, that the recycling would be the only thing left. And that changed in the last week, after workshops even finished, and that is why I would like this table to have the opportunity to reconsider. Thirdly, at the last workshop, we were then told that there's an option of a community rate being applied to fund this facility. What a win-win situation. There was 100% support within the LTP consultation for keeping that recycling facility. 100%. Not one person said, oh yeah, close it, great idea. Oh, it set Mr. Jackson, and frankly I'd like to give him an average of $17 every year that facility remains open, should that be, because I think I should help him out with the cost. He's the only person who objected to it. But more importantly, if other people in Waikanae want to object to this and want to object to paying more for this facility because they've got wheelie bins and they're happy, I want them to have their say. And my co-signees want them to have their say also. This is an important issue for the people of Waikanae, perhaps not so much for the people in the rest of the district. The comment from the CE that this is a complete rebuttal of the commitment in the LTP to close is an interesting one. This actually is a reflection of a failure of the workshop process, nothing else. And it is really disappointing that there weren't any extra spare workshops or discussions held when we first raised this issue, and which was within an hour of getting home from the last workshop, that something had gone seriously wrong. So I am requesting your support table to simply do what our LTP consultation process should have done, and that was ask the actual question, Waikanae residents, do you want to pay to keep this facility open if you use it and if it means something to you? Frankly, that's what the last 7 months' work should have been done, should have covered off. I'm going to leave this now up to the rest of the table to debate, but I am asking you something, we are asking you something very, very simple.
It's not open for debate. Anybody else? Councillor McCann.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, I just want to make sure that it's appropriate to ask a question that really needs to be answered by the people who are putting the motion. Is it appropriate to ask that question through you?
I thought you did raise it before, but I will allow you.
In order for us to discuss this, I think there are probably a couple of questions about what the motion actually means in terms of user pays. So could I ask the people who are putting the motion forward how that is proposed to work, because it's a very broad statement.
Can I suggest that during the right of reply that question is answered? Or do you want it now?
I'm only trying to be helpful, Your Honour. Your Worship, sorry, you're not quite.
you can tell he's a lawyer, right?
Although I'm told that when you voted twice, that was almost a judicial decision. What I'm trying to do is just understand the motion better as before we discuss it, because I think the idea of user pays, there are probably some questions in members' heads as to who's actually going to pay, whether it is the users of the facility or the users in Waikanae, and whether that means that some people will end up effectively paying twice because of the provision that they undertake with private.
Councillor Elliott.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to open this up to my co-signees because they're perfectly capable of answering this.
Councillor Brabnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for the question, Rob. I've been sitting on the edge of my seat here wanting to say some things. So this motion has been amended because we received information from the CE that it wasn't legally robust.
Can you answer the question specifically?
Yes, I
because
will.
your time for debate will come.
And so we have amended it so that it is. And so what it means by user pay, we've been very general here. So it is not necessarily about a Waikanae tide rate. It is potentially, it could include a user pays option where those who actually go to the recycling centre are the ones who use it. And that's the information that we want to glean from members of the public. So we certainly, I personally, and I think it's the view of the other members who've signed this, is not to stop the long-term plan process and not to stop the right. We don't want to. We want the process to continue, but to actually give Waikanae residents the options of saying that the long-term plan was actually, this section in the long-term plan was actually quite muddled. So it didn't separate out the green waste or the recycling, and that more information has come forward that the green waste section is going to stay open. So it's giving, the feedback in the consultation is that everyone wants this. So the question is now, do you want it enough to pay for it?
Thank you. I don't need it to be a debate between you all. That's why I was quite reluctant to. So do you want to speak now on the debate?
I just want to say I do not know that my question was answered.
Well, that makes two of us. Councillor.
May I, Mr. Mayor, through you? I feel I need to put this in the mix. We have no idea how a user pays approach could be implemented. So targeted rate, we understand. I'm advised that it would not be possible. Do you want to speak further, Sean, or not? Because we would like to be helpful if we could, but when you're asking for something that nobody's thought about and basically we can't implement, I'm not sure that that's a false expectation being put on the table, that it could be a user pays where you turn up and pay at the gate.
The problem I get, there's an issue associated with that, in terms of the contractually, we would have to commit to be providing the service through a contract with a provider, and that would require a commitment to payment. We wouldn't know whether or not we would recover enough user pays, fees and charges to meet those commitments, because obviously the revenue is dependent on the amount of users. So again, it would be, that would be the main issue, and a similar issue to the rubbish bags. Anything that's user pays that has a contractual element, you have to make the commitment in advance of returning the revenue. So there's an issue certainly there in terms of how that would actually function on that site.
Okay, look, back to the debate. Anybody else want to speak on this? Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, I just want to say that there's just a lot of uncertainty about this. We don't know what it means. We don't know what it would mean per user. We don't know what the survey would look like. We don't know the cost of it. To me, it's on the fly decision making, which has the risk of unintended consequences. And we're also not sure of the status of our long-term plan should we pass it today and pass this motion. We've heard that the infrastructure isn't ours, so we don't need to retain it. So that part of the motion is redundant. And I'm thinking that this can be reinstated if the infrastructure isn't ours and we haven't burnt all our bridges, things can be reinstated and we still can carry out this survey without voting this through today and impacting on our long-term plan process. What's being suggested isn't simple, it's actually expensive and it's complicated. So I won't be supporting this motion today.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I won't be supporting this motion today. I understand where it's come from and why my colleagues have brought it to the table. But I don't believe it is good governance in the way that it is presented. My recollection of the submissions was that the number of the submissions that when we did consult on the closure of the facility referred specifically to, in their verbatim comments, their use of the green waste aspect of the facility. So that is a major component of it, and as we know through a proposed lease agreement that Mr Mallon has talked about, that will retain. So that does address a number of the concerns from the submitters in the submission process. I do not believe that we didn't consult on it. It was part of our consultation document. And I refute the suggestion that it was poorly done. We owned that. Those drafts were brought back to this table. We provided feedback. We determined the key questions. We even worked through the wording of it. If anyone has to own that document, it is this table because we signed off on it, not the staff. The staff simply prepared the work to bring to this table to help inform the discussion. If this table wanted that to be a key question, in those key questions, that is your job. That is my job. It is not the job of the staff. Obviously, they put suggestions forward. But if we decide that that needs to be elevated to a higher question, as was done with one other question that was included or raised in the list, that is our job to do as the governance body of this organisation. And I don't think it is fair to put it back on the organisation that it was shoddy and wasn't done well and wasn't consulted on adequately. We also had an extra workshop, which was added on the Tuesday. So again, I think it is unhelpful to suggest that there wasn't consulted on and that there wasn't sufficient workshops and so forth to be had on this. If you don't agree with the way that was done, again, that's our job to steer the ship in terms of making sure that more work is done in that area. But more importantly, I can't support it because it just doesn't make sense to me. It's been touted as a $17 rate when we've already heard its use of haze. If only 10 people turn up to use it, as Mr Mallon has said, you will have a shortfall in funding. Now, let's just say that 200 people turn up to use it, or even 500 people to use it in a year. You could still have a shortfall in funding, and if it is those small numbers, it would have to be a hell of a user pay charge to cover the $123,000 that's needed to run the facility. And that's only in year one. What is it going to be in year 2 or year 3? So I don't support it because I just don't think enough thought has gone into the approach. I would have supported a motion that talked about, as we had raised through the workshops, the opportunity for waste minimalisation projects on the site, like has been done with Zero Waste in Otaki. Those approaches, I think, can be done. The response from staff was that they are options moving forward. And that would be something that I would support if that was to come to a future annual plan, and that residents in Waikana wanted to do something as has been done in Otaki. Absolutely support the principles around waste minimisation. I just can't support this motion as it sits in its current wording.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I'll just endorse Councillor Coates' comments. We've been through discussion around this, and we took the straw poll and made a democratic decision around it. My position was pretty clear. Look, I understand what's trying to be achieved here. I just think we need to be looking at a district-wide strategy in relation to our waste minimalisation or upcycling, etc. I would like to think that we can be looking at this space as we move forward for waste minimisation or upcycling, for education in that space, or maybe accessing the upcoming waste minimisation fund for potential initiatives in this space. And this is all stuff that we can do after this process is finished. I don't think we need to have a motion in place to specifically do that, but again, as Councillor Coote said, that could perhaps be worded differently to achieve that. I don't want to see the long-term plan held up in relation to this particular issue, as it has been discussed, and it has had a lot of discussion regards to this as well. So I won't be supporting the motion moving forward.
Councillor Hedford.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor. At first, I was very concerned about this service being removed from Waikanae, but on reflection, not seeing the complete numbers of households that aren't serviced by curbside recycling, it is a bit difficult to understand the amount of patronage that the recycling centre actually gets. Within our submissions, we heard lots of residents concerned in Waikanae about the removal of the entire site, and those concerns have been alleviated by council working really closely with Composting New Zealand to retain that service and come to an agreement, a lease agreement, where the green waste service, which is really important to Waikanae residents and also Waikanae businesses, will be retained, which I think is a really great outcome. And having that consultation has resulted in that good outcome, which is great. And going forward, I won't be supporting this motion. And, you know, I think that our council needs to be prudent with our money, and by saving $123,000 a year, that's really important. It's really important for us right now.
Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora, Mr. Mayor. So the reason why we brought this amendment this morning, which as fellow councillors Elliott and Pravanov have mentioned already, but we suggested this amendment as a way to bring this back to the table in a productive way to hopefully allow the conversation to happen while still hopefully allowing the LTP to pass today and for us to not be held up in the process. So we saw a user pay system as a way of not bringing a change in rates and therefore needing to change the LTP as a result of that conversation. So my view is that if Waikanae residents are willing to pay for the recycling service, then it is my view that they should have access to it. It's as simple as that. If people are willing to pay to have a place in their local community to put their recycling if they don't have curbside collection, and they want to make that contribution to the planet and for their own household to be able to do what they can to the next level to protect our environment, then they should be able to do that. And so I think if they're willing to pay for it, depending on the cost and if that consultational survey is able to happen, then if they are willing to pay for it, then it's my view they should have access to it. So the way that the CE interpreted the motion as his reading of it is exactly the way that I read it too. And I don't think that would hinder the process today, but it would then just allow the conversation to continue and for us to actually hear properly what residents of Waikanae are thinking and feeling about this particular issue. And I think we need to do their concerns justice and also their willingness to potentially pay for this recycling facility justice. So I will be supporting this amended motion today.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. I just want to chuck in my support behind the comments made by Councillor Holborough, Councillor Cootes and Councillor Halliday. I was one of the people who obviously indicated my support for retaining it when we had our workshops. But I sort of take the view that we've had two bites of that cherry, and the view at the table was ultimately to not proceed with keeping it open, and that was based on the advice we had from officers. So we had got to consider what the potential cost would be of keeping it open. I think the comments that Councillor Cootes made around that actually, while we might be closing the current facility there's actually options in terms of what we can do on the site going ahead. I think that's something that we should definitely investigate, and I wholeheartedly support that as what I would see as a better way through, rather than potentially holding up what's effectively a $88 million document this year over what's probably about 0.1% of its funding. I think putting it in that sort of perspective, there are times in this job that you'll dig in your heels over things that you're very passionate about. But in this case, I think there are better ways to address the things that we're trying to achieve there in terms of those sustainability outcomes for Waikanae. So I won't be supporting this motion today.
Thank you. Councillor Randall, can we get a response from him?
Bernie needs to unmute.
Bernie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. Your right to speak.
Well, I thought Councillor Hanford summed it up very well. So I will be supporting the motion.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right. End of the debate. Right of reply. We are right in the midst of this. Councillor.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to address some of the things that were topics brought up in debate. The waste minimisation can indeed be done on site, and the Waikanae community needs every opportunity to do that. But that starts with the resource collection, and that is what recycling is all about. And that is why it is so. That is why basically every other recycling hub in the country becomes the base for the waste minimisation and the resource recovery process. It is such a pity to be shutting the doors on this site and this opportunity and then expecting it to all reopen. That's quite backward. The Composting New Zealand are remaining, but certainly table they were not remaining, and we were in the understanding that they were vacating that site at all times that we made our previous had our previous workshops. And it wasn't until after the end of the last workshop that we were told that it was back on the table. Just perhaps correcting Councillor Compton, the view of the table and workshops was not to close this facility. In the first vote, it was quite a majority said to keep it open, and the second vote was a split vote. That I queried immediately what happened next, which is a very unfortunate episode in this council. I'm a little bit, Angela, I want to thank you for your comments, but I'm not sure about your conflict of interest and whether or not you'll be voting or not, but I do appreciate your comments and thank you. Yeah. It's good to have your contribution in this discussion, finally. And so, lastly, I will, of course, be supporting keeping the opportunity open for the people of Waikanae to have a discussion and to have their input properly into this and keeping it open. As far as the quality of the consultation in the surveying of Waikanae people that has gone on to date, this is a major reduction in service. There was a scant mention of it in the consultation document. And I suspect having scant mention of major projects in consultation documents and annual plans will be something that will be brought up as quite a large topic in the Gateway review. And I am expecting some criticism from the reviewers of the way we carried out our consultation for the Gateway, but I can see that the same mistakes potentially have just been made. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to put the vote. Motion moved by Councillor Elliott and seconded by Councillor Pravanov. All those in favour of that, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, Councillor Buswell.
There is a perceived conflict of interest with me participating in the vote, so I'm going to abstain.
Noted. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? No. Division. Those in favour, put your hands up. Chief Executive. Oh, can I just double check with Councillor Randall?
Yes, that would be appropriate. Councillor Randall, can you declare if you're a yes?
Yes.
I'm in favour.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
So I will call out your name as part of the division. Councillor Randall, Councillor Hanford, Councillor Pravanov, Councillor Elliott.
All those against?
Councillor Halliday, Councillor Compton, Councillor Coots, the Mayor, Councillor Holborough, Councillor McCann.
The motion is lost. We'll take a break before we come back to Mark and Alison to. Bernie, we are taking a 5 minutes break.